Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 40 of GT Masters, the review series for Gran Turismo's selection of primarily GT class race cars of course, and also some vehicles which, although they're not necessarily GT class cars, they do fall within similar parameters. And this particular vehicle is a pretty strong vehicle to go for right off the bat. It's a car which you do see some people using, but not necessarily as many as you might expect, because although the GT-R in street form is a hugely popular car on the game, the Nismo, the Black Edition, the Spec V, etc., the race cars aren't actually used as much by as many people as the road cars. The road versions are hugely popular. As far as the race car goes though, it tends to be only one or two of them which gets a huge amount of exposure, and that tends to be the R35 touring car, which is very popular, and also the GT500 GT-R, usually the stealth model. Those are by far the two most commonly used. This car does get some use, and those who do use it tend to do quite well with it. And when you look into the spec of the car, it's not difficult to see why. Because basically, the good thing about this car, and I'm not a huge GT-R fan, not of the R35 at least, but you do have to admit, even if you're not a fan of the car, that what this car does really well is it takes what the GT-R is already good at and takes it to the next level. Because like all cars, the GT-R does have some downsides, some things that can be improved on. And primarily, in the case of the R35, I would say that the thing that it really needs to improve on in terms of making it competition ready is the weight. It's a reasonably heavy car due to the amount of tech put into it. This car takes the basic brilliance, if you will, of the GT-R, and then just touches up a couple of those things which allow it to go from extremely good road car to extremely good race car, such as lowering that weight. And this is actually one of the lightest GT-R based race cars in the game. Not necessarily quite as light as the GT500 cars, but to be fair, they are barely even GT-Rs anymore. They're all so almost NASCAR-esque in the way they're built. They're almost completely different machines, whereas this is still a very closely based model on the R35. Now the fact that this car weighs 1,279 kilos is actually seriously impressive for a GT-R, especially when you consider that it still has all-wheel drive. Now that's notable for a couple of reasons. One, because that's rare for a race car, and also because that allows it to potentially be an all-weather weapon. The kind of car that you can pull out in a wet, rainy lobby and still have a really good chance of winning in. So that is definitely to be noted. You can go much quicker through the rain in an all-wheel drive car than you can in a front-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive car, regardless of tyres. Now as far as its fully tuned form, this car has, as you'd probably expect, a 3.8 litre engine. Fully tuned, most of the GT-Rs, especially the R35s, have pretty impressive power, and this one's no exception. 1,064 horsepower, 843 foot-pounds of torque. So with that kind of combination of huge power, huge torque, and relatively low weight, especially in an all-wheel drive chassis, you're pretty much guaranteed to have an extremely quick car. And it is extremely quick. And that is mirrored by the fact that the PP on this car is very, very high, 692. That's a similar kind of region to the SLS AMG and the Ford GT LM race car Spec 2. But the difference with this car is that, unlike, I would say, the Ford GT, this is actually deserving of being that high. The SLS AMG, you can understand why it's that high, it's a brilliant car. The Ford, not so much. This definitely deserves to be that high because it is a dominating track machine, and it is largely due to that all-wheel drive. Now I'm not saying rear-wheel drive is bad, of course not. Many cars work better with a rear-wheel drive around a track than they would if they were all-wheel drive. Even some of the GT-Rs do. But in the case of this particular GT-R, the all-wheel drive works with it, I would say, extremely well. Now as far as straight-line performance, pretty much all of the GT-Rs of the R35 generation are quick, and this is no exception. Now, an interesting thing about this car, as far as top-end performance, is that like the Team RJN model, and by extension the GT3 base model, and also the other GT3, which is, I think, a Schulze version like this car, but the GT3 car instead of the N24 car, suffer from a very interesting high-speed issue. And that issue is that they can do around 245, 247-ish miles per hour with a good top speed tune. But if you lower the back end and raise the front, and slightly rework the gearing and the downforce, you can make them have a significant jump in performance. You can get them actually up around 260 under their own power. But they immediately become extremely heavy for steering, to the point where you actually cannot take the corner on Special Stage Route X without crashing into the wall. So it's an interesting little issue that these cars seem to have in terms of top speed, in that they can have good top speed, but you automatically forfeit handling by doing so. Whereas if you tune it to do around 240, 245, 247, it's still very heavy at high speed, but it's much more controlled. As far as acceleration, off the line it's very good due to the all-wheel drive, and it's a GT-R, so everyone knows it's going to be quick all through its entire performance range. As far as handling, this car is outstandingly good, I would say. All of the GT-Rs are good handling cars, the race cars, the road cars. This one has a bit more of a beginner-friendly nature, I would say, than the GT500 cars, which are very, very professionally focused machines. They are quicker overall if you learn to drive them effectively, but they're also less forgiving, less beginner-friendly, whereas this car is very easy to drive. It doesn't feel like a car with 1,064 horsepower, and it just delivers that power and performance in a really usable, easy-to-drive way. Add on top of that the fact that it's a full premium, and it only costs 500,000 credits, and the value is through the roof. So if you're looking for a strong all-rounder, definitely check out this car. But that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.